But I know you started off as an independent creator. Like before you started hosting and really seeing you amongst some of the biggest brands, you started off as an independent creator with your own like podcast, your own platform. Tell us a little bit about that, and tell the people like how did you even venture into that?
True. So the first podcast that's actually probably nowhere online at this point. She's like, let's just bring it all down. The first podcast was actually with my sister. We had a podcast called Sidebar, and we used to and this was when was this? 2014, 2015.
Oh, wow.
So really
before.
I
love when I hear that.
Yes. And when I tell you, I'm like, I was always interested, but it was always like, how?
Hey guys, it's Anna, founder of Black Pod Collective, Black Pod Festival, and Adode Media, and your host of the Podcast Trapper, your one-stop shop resource for all things podcasting and really a little bit of entrepreneurship and media. And this week, I'm so excited for what we have in store because I have someone who, she's been doing this. Like, she's not new to this, she's true to this. And she has been working in this industry tirelessly for many years. And I'm so excited for Akilah to join us today as our very second guest, girl. Yes.
Okay.
Welcome. Thank you. Very second guest to talk about her experience. So I don't feel like I could do her justice introducing her. So I definitely want to hand this over to you to tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I appreciate that. And thank you for making the space for me to just come in and chat and do all the things. So again, my name is Akilah Ffriend. I would say just from a small, very short-end introduction, I'm a media executive and on-air host. Like, that's the two things that I do. Oh, I love that.
She said executive. But no, yes. Akilah, like, I'm so excited for this conversation because I think oftentimes we see people in podcasting, we see people create platforms, but we don't really understand, like, how did they get here?
Yes.
Like, what did it take? And I think sometimes social media can make it seem as though you blink your fingers, I said blink your fingers. Yeah, y'all heard that. I mean, it can be that too.
That's how social media makes it seem. So,
and you show up and all of a sudden you have a platform and there's not work to it.
Yeah.
So can you give us a little bit of background as to like how you got started in media, and did you know this is what you wanted to be doing?
Great first question. I'll answer the second part first. No, not exactly. I knew I always had an interest in media. I was always super like, I loved TV, loved film, loved the idea of just connecting with people, but I didn't really see this as the way to do it as a profession. Probably blame it on being first generation, blame it on just like not really seeing that done in the way that I expected, or I guess from people who I felt also had other things that they could potentially do, And then to answer your first question, though, like how I got into it, it really was just a series of just like, slowly but surely trusting myself and just trusting like, the opportunities that I could make for myself, right? So I started off, after college or during college, I thought I wanted to go into healthcare. I thought like, girl, listen,
that's the foreign. That's the foreign. Okay. You're gonna be a doctor, a nurse, or something.
That's what it is. And so I thought, you know what? I can't see myself doing the actual procedures, but I'm like, but I could either like, let me either be a psychologist. So I was actually thinking of psychiatry. That's how I applied to colleges in the first place, which I think now when you think about it, it's always had that interest in just like, why? What makes people tick right or left? And how can I get them to tick center? So that's kind of how it's always been. And then, actually was after a chemistry class, in college, I thought, you know what? No.
Chemistry is always what does us
in. It is that weed out class. Keep doing it because you need to push people into what they actually need to be doing. But then I thought, you know what? Healthcare administration. I thought, you know what? I would run a hospital. So that's when kind of I was thinking through. I loved business and was thinking, how can I incorporate that into what I already said I was going to do, not add another year to complete this degree.
So I'm trying to get out of here.
It's time to live life. So I thought that. And I started by doing consulting. And so I worked at Ernst & Young, and that's kind of where I started the whole healthcare, pathway. And immediately when I was there, so I would give EY credit for this. Like immediately when I was there, I noticed people were doing projects for media companies. So, oh, what? I didn't even know this was a thing. Like people are telling media companies, hey, you're doing this. This is how we can help you do this or that or whatever. So it gave me an opportunity just by joining that firm to slowly network my way into consulting for some of the biggest like companies, whether that be like digital agencies, studios, networks, things of the like. And it was at a time where everyone was finally recognizing Netflix to be a thing. They were like, okay, this is actually right. Something I should, big sigh, and big checks that they were putting towards a lot of these firms to, make things happen. And slowly but surely, kind of made my way first by consulting, then by going to business school, and then focusing in on working for some of these companies. Again, always through media and through business, I should say. And through doing that, I always had the gnawing thought, like, I really want to do more on-air stuff. Mm-hmm. But again, it was more of a thing where I'm like, you know what? I'm doing this. Mm-hmm. Let me focus on this. Like, maybe this might be a hobby. Like, just you don't want to
come across like you all over the place. You're like, let me focus my energy on this one thing so that this way people are like, okay, she's a serious
person. Exactly. Serious person. And also because I was like, you know what? I think if I were to do this, and it's not like I quote unquote made it doing this yet, the executive piece, I would feel like I would be lost at sea in a sense, mm-hmm. And not really being able to choose extra. In hindsight, who knows? I think everything happens for a reason, but mm-hmm. I think there's perhaps timing because I see now a lot more people are doing both at the same time and being okay with it,
Look, mm-hmm. I have a background in healthcare. Yes. I could not do all of this at the same time. Right. There's just no way. I used to work 12, 13-hour days, looking at reports, trying to figure this out. So I fully get, like, wanting to make that leap. Mm-hmm. But I also remember when I first started Black Pod Collective, I was still working in healthcare.
Right.
And I think I never told anybody about Black Pod Collective. I feel it. I didn't want them to be like, so this little side little project, this little hobby. And it's like, it's not little. It's big.
I actually see it being the biggest.
All right, what are you saying? It's big. I'm a big girl now. Like you feel like you have to defend yourself. So it's like you're protecting your brand and your image.
Yes.
But I know you started off as an independent creator. Like before you started hosting and really seeing you amongst some of the biggest brands, you started off as an independent creator with your own like podcast, your own platform. Tell us a little bit about that, and tell the people like how did you even venture into that?
True. So the first podcast that's actually probably nowhere online at this point. She was like, let's just bring it all down. The first podcast was actually with my sister. We had a podcast called Sidebar, and we used to and this was when was this? 2014, 2015.
Oh, wow.
So really
before.
I
love when I hear that.
Yes. And when I tell you, I'm like, I was always interested, but it was always like, how? So this was the first, it was like a conversational piece type of podcast where we sometimes would bring on folks who were either doing their thing in their respective careers, but also like we did relationships and professionalism and things of that nature. And just talking about like, listen, we're young folks getting it. What does that even look like? A time. It was a time. A time. And how do I get started with that was really like setting up a camera, going, it was actually, I think my company at that point, like during weekends or sometimes weeknights, I would rent out, or not even rent out, literally book out a room, say, hey, I'm going to need this room for 2 hours, set the little camera up and like bring someone else in or whatever that we were interviewing or talking to at that point. And literally just learn as I go. That's the first time I learned what editing really meant. Oof. And listen, those videos. Yes, after a while I was like, just put it up. It looks good. It looks good.
It's gonna make it.
We're gonna record it as though it's live. All the things.
It's intentional.
Right?
We want to get that authentic feel. That's like we're going for the no edit
exactly.
so you can see the real us.
The real us.
No, I'm gonna you're like, I don't have 10 hours.
I don't, and I don't have the storage space. So that's how it started, and then doing that for a while. I stopped actually when I started business school, and again, kind of like life in. And then I picked it back up while in I think it was in between my first and second, right before graduation, I picked it back up. By this point, going more grassroots again, but really working for this company called AfterBuzz TV, which is like a media, like they kind of do after shows. And it was founded by Maria Menounos, who's like an e-news host. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. Like, let's go and talk.
Baby.
Meanwhile, it was grassroots, but a team, a team of grassroots. And so again, a series of like just doing it and just trying and just thinking like, this is what I want to do. I don't really know how best. It's not really laid out a cookie cutter way of how do you get from point A to point B. But if I just keep putting myself out there and keep like just attempting things, something might eventually click. And it was a series of doing that honestly for years because I was independent, still am independent, but really independent in terms of not really having like a network affiliation where I was doing on-air stuff until, so that started 2014 and this was 2022 when, you know, really it became something that's a little more consistent because we could talk about dipping and dabbing all day, but this was consistent, right?
I love that because in essence, like I remember seeing your highlight reel, I think is what it's called. I'm learning the words. I remember seeing your highlight reel and just was like, oh my God, like you've done so many things and it feels like you positioned yourself intentionally to be able to get those opportunities. Yeah. And I think sometimes we just don't know how to go about that.
No.
We just don't know how to go about that. Like we don't know what areas or what opportunities to go for or where to even find these opportunities. So how would you say like some of these platforms found you? Like how do they even recognize the work that you were doing? Because I always know that there's so many people doing the work, but then it's like, hello, anybody there?
What's going on? Honestly, I'm the queen of knocking on some doors, knocking down some doors,
that part.
And just being in the room. Like, so this is what I would credit in terms of me deciding to pause and decide to say, like, how do I want to show up in, like, how do I want my brand to be seen professionally from day one? I knew at first, let me do the business route. And on one end, it was like, yeah, like, this is something that's practical. This is something that I know I am still interested in. And this is something that at least is in the same industry. So knowing about what the industry entails helped me a ton. But it also, I think it helps to form some level of how are you different? And I think when we're thinking of how do we break through the noise, it's because you're different in some way. You're yourself, but you being yourself is enough of a difference. But what is that? You know, maybe you are, yes, you want to do on-air stuff, you want to do podcasting, et cetera, but you also like, you could beat a face down. Like that's probably your differentiating factor. Maybe it's your background. For me, it is, I think, my background, what I stand for, like my love of just really creating opportunities for underrepresented people to build their lives that they love. And so by doing that, how am I building the life that I love? And so, yeah, that was step one, I think, is just form some level of differentiation. And so for me, it was through the industry. And so I think that helped a ton, too, to just learn how do people even, it's not like I was even in the industry and working, let's say, producing or casting. So I had no idea how people got picked. I had no idea how shows got made. But at the same time, like, I knew at the end of the day, how do those shows even get seen? Money behind it, things behind. How does it become something that's not just like, okay, you guys made a great show? And so by doing that, I end up being able to just be in contact with people who were a lot of the decision makers in terms of just like, you know, having certain shows on air. That was really my job. Let's say, you know, when I worked at Apple, when I worked at HBO and Viacom, all of that was around choosing what content that I wanted on air, choosing what shows, what TV shows, like at what price point, what promotions that I wanted to have on air. And by doing that, I became a little more understanding of like, what does it take for a certain show to be there and how to negotiate and promote yourself and your story. And so that's step one. And then the other piece, I think, in terms of how people can like potentially get picked or seen or just, you know, make progress in the traditional sense.
That visibility.
You know, it's the visibility. And oftentimes it's a volume game. Like, you got to keep putting the content out there, as annoying as it is. Sometimes there are things that I put out that still probably has 5 views. You know, like, still, but it's like, but I'm still putting the stuff out there and I'm like, you know what? It's okay. And I think the third piece that's just for like more of like a mental health sanity type of thing, I really pride myself in having more than one thing. And so that means like all my eggs are not in this basket. I don't feel like everything is riding on this one thing. Like having more than one just opportunity, it gives you not only more of like a playing field, but also more of a buffer to really just take care and be okay with the time that it takes to make something happen.
And it helps your creativity.
That too.
Because when you're stressed about how am I going to pay my bills?
Okay.
When you're stressed about this has to work because
Yes.
if it doesn't, I'm screwed. Your creativity is really stagnant.
That's true.
You know, like I've talked to y'all about how with Planet Black Pod Festival, baby, I couldn't think of nothing else. I just was like, this is $75,000, so it has to go well. And that level of anxiety and stress, I'm sure when you're breaking into a new industry, you have to feel like, okay, wait a minute, we're doing a little bit of this, we're doing a little bit of that. And I feel like you've done a great job of that.
Thank you.
Like, I don't know how you sleep or when you rest. I don't know, but from what I've seen, you put out consistent content and you're consistently ensuring that people see your face and know that you're there. And that seems to be what has worked for you, is that going after it.
Just going after it.
Because I say all the time, what's the worst that can happen? They tell you no.
That's it. That's it. And then honestly, you get no a couple times and you're used to it. You're like, all right, I could say no in 5 different languages. It's fine, like whatever. I'm still going to try. But I don't want to, because I think right now I'm in that period of like, oh, you know, this is the first time that I don't have multiple eggs in multiple baskets, or I'm like going after multiple things, and it is unnerving. So I definitely feel because at some point, not that you have to make a choice, I don't ever think you should, but oftentimes because you're going after things that may not be independent, you might be working with a company or this or that, they make choices for you, right? And so because of that, I'm more in a state of now where it's like, okay, this is what it means to not truly be independent, right? And how does that, am I comfortable with that? I don't think I am. I think I am.
I've asked myself the question and I've answered it.
Right? So now I'm still at the stage of like, well, what does that mean in terms of what my next steps are? How do I, fail forward in a sense, especially where now it's like it's a bigger scale, It's not like where I'm starting out scrappy, young 20-year-old, like, let me just try something out. Now it's like, okay, what's the goal? What's going on and how are you doing it? So I think, so just to say, even though I'm saying all these things and think you all should do all these things, there's also a level of grace to know that everyone's journey is a little bit different,
Most definitely. Like, I have multiple things.
Right?
As we know. But it's also that notion of, I tell people all the time, I don't have a husband.
No.
Lord, I'm praying for him. Come join me whenever you are
listening.
ready, sir. If you are one of my listeners, I am available. So just, keep that in mind.
Okay.
Shameless
And do you have
plug.
a brother?
But at the same token, I also don't have kids. Like, it allows a lot more flexibility in my life.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, don't look at somebody else's situation and wishing for that when you don't really know the circumstances.
Right.
So the time that you spend with your kids, your family, I use that on this business.
Yeah.
And some days I'd be like, you know what? I would give all of this away so I can have a husband and some kids. Jesus, where are they? And so it's one of those things of you have to look at what works best for your life.
Yeah.
Weigh your pros and cons and figure out, like, can you deal with the ups and downs?
Yeah.
Like, it ain't all gravy. Don't let social media fool you. I tell people all the time, like, Christmas time, every December, I be like, was this a bad idea?
What's going
Like,
on?
folks don't be coming to the studio. People aren't trying to start podcasts.
Ooh, you're right.
And then January hits, and I'd be like, Father God, I need a break. Wait. And so it's being able to prepare your life for those up and down seasons.
Exactly.
So I know that do you want to tell the people? Because you are on multiple platforms. So you were with Black Girl Stuff. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
And that's a huge platform. That's a lot of visibility. How was that experience in the sense of towards what you're trying to get to?
Yes. So ultimately what I want to do is be a talk show host and ultimately, like, really a media mogul. Like, I want to be a talk show. Yes.
She done used executive. Now she's talking about some mogul. I am liking these words.
Come on. We're to God's ears. That's it.
Touch and agree.
Okay.
Touch and agree.
Touch all the things, okay? Yes, no, but the goal is really to be a talk show host, which crazy enough, it was, again, something that I couldn't really say out loud. Like, I really, now it's like, no, that's what I want to do.
You've done it.
No, right. Right.
You can say it.
That's it.
Let anybody try to be like, girl, you sure? Yes, I am sure, because let me show you my receipts.
Check the receipts. Check the receipts. That's that. And then really, like I said, like, just have some sort of media to be able to just really touch on that entrepreneurial arm too, like in terms of things I want to do. And so like really Black Girl Stuff, which was the first season on Revolt. It was a talk show, a digital talk show on Revolt. And it was an amazing experience, like in terms of just being able to just, oh my gosh, this is what it means when I can like hands off, hair, makeup, outfits, everything.
I said, ooh,
get
I want to be like you when I grow up, baby.
I loved. And it was kind of one of those things where it's like, wow, when you have really a production, a team, like really like you mentioned the independent route, and still like it's a night and day difference, but it also prepared me because I was able to then see like, oh, okay, I know what you're doing in some capacity. I don't know it all.
Yeah, I know a little bit.
I don't know it all, but I know, okay, so this shot was, okay, cool. You need me to go? All right, no problem. And so it was a great opportunity just to be able to really live out what I wanted to do. And so that's that. And then also with Revolt, have a podcast, which is why Anna and I are such close bosom buddies at this point. It's called Monuments to Me, and Anna with Adode Media is, like, I would call you production, but I'm like really just housing.
Production leg for Monuments to Me under Revolt. And Akilah is one of, we're going into season 2, and baby, I'm excited for season 2. Like the lineup of people, like we've been reaching out to guests, girl, and these guests is good.
Yeah.
But like, I think oftentimes when people see these shows and stuff like that, it's like, dang, was there a casting call? Like, how did I miss that? Like, how did that happen? So like, can you tell us like how you got tapped by Revolt?
Yeah, well, let me tell you a bit about divine intervention too, like because
yes. All it.
That's all it. That was for real. So at this point, I was VP of content at a startup streaming service.
She's using all the words. She was the VP of content.
And if we gonna do it, we gonna do it. Okay.
She said, "I'm not new to this. I'm true to this.
Let's do this." So as part of that, the interesting thing, though, was kind of like it was a startup, and so things are building, et cetera. And I was thinking to myself, like, you know what? Based on what I want to do, I want to make sure that I'm not forgetting me, right? And so part of that, I thought to myself, well, let me apply to a job, do something part-time. At this point, I was thinking, like, even if I get in, like, social media manager, PA, just something to just be in the door and just like start to build that repertoire there. And so literally, I saw a job description for Revolt for like a part-time social media manager. I said, okay, part-time, maybe I could fit this in. Let's see how this could work. See what we can do. Applied. I got a call from the HR folks, and we had a conversation. And midway through, I was like, you know what? I know it's something we never do in interviews, but
shoot my shot.
This is what I really want to do, right? And I shot my shot there. She was like, okay, like blah, blah. And I thought that was the end of the conversation. Let's move on, go back. Couple of days later, I think it was a day or a week or so later, she reached out and was like, you know what? There's someone I want you to talk to.
Man, the way I would have fallen out, I'd be like, God, show up and show out.
Show up and show out.
I'd be like, yeah, of course.
Of course. And that was that. And so someone I want you to talk to, she's in Atlanta, though. At this point, I was living in LA. And I was like, what was so crazy is you were talking about in terms of the sacrifices, like, I was thinking of moving cities. And the reason why was not career related. I was like, listen, LA has blessed me there, but I feel like every other part of my life, mainly like, getting like this man and being more romantically inclined, having a friend
was gonna be the man.
So I was shopping cities.
I was like,
listen,
I hate to be the one to say this was not it. This was not it.
The Lord said, not everything at once.
Take what you can get. The Korean might be here.
That's it. Nothing else. And so Atlanta was one of the cities I was considering. And I was like, it's crazy. The day that she said, hey, if you're around, meet someone. And I was like, listen, I'm actually going to be in Atlanta this time. So it worked out. Conversation. The other piece that was kind of like, wow, this is insane. I had a conversation then with, I think, someone from Revolt, and she mentioned that, actually, wow, I wish I knew you beforehand. We have the show coming up, but casting is already closed, but, let's just keep in touch. And that's, again, I was like, okay, leave it where it is. Then a week or two later, she called and she was like, you know what? It's heavy on my heart. I'm going to reopen casting.
Ooh.
Can you imagine?
What?
And so at this point, you talking about falling out before. At this point, I was like, Lord,
what?
I know this is you. I know this is you. What else? Who else
could this be?
Literally. And so that's how that happened. And so obviously came down to casting, and it was again like they thought the girls were set, and I was like, well, not yet.
But wait, there's more. But wait, there's more. I'm just saying.
It's crazy. And so that's how that came about. But it's at the same time, there was someone within the head of podcast. He, I guess, were also alerted by this woman who called her, listen.
I mean, she's your angel.
I told her, I said, listen, what do you want for Christmas?
Girl, what you need?
What you need?
Literally.
And she said, no, nothing like that. It is what it is. So when we connected, this is separately for the podcast, we connected and just, again, good conversation. I told him, like, this is what it is. Like, this is what I'm interested in. What do you have on your slate? Like, I think we could work something out. And that was more of like a direct, I guess, let's just wait and see, and waited and see and saw, and
here we are.
We're seeing. That's what it was, and so that's how both came into the picture for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like the fact, y'all. Hold on. I know we did a lot of laughing, so y'all may have missed it. So let me break this down real quick. In essence, you went from I'm working as a VP in a startup media company, streaming company, to I'm going to shoot my shot because I want to get my foot in the door. I don't care if it's just in social media, part-time, what the situation is. This is where I want to be at. These are the people who are creating what I want to see in the world, and I want to be a part of that.
There we go.
And you took a leap of faith. You're like, I don't know when I'm going to find the time, but I'm going to find it because this is what mattered to you.
That's it.
You took a leap of faith during the interview. When you got your foot in the door, you said, look, I'm about to push the door completely open.
Yeah.
And you pretty much capitalized on that from one check to another.
Right.
And we don't see a lot of that because oftentimes, I think as a society, we're told to like, okay, don't be too ambitious.
Don't be, there it is. There it is.
You know?
Yep.
Because I know if I had told my mother that, she'd be like, don't you think you're doing too much?
Right.
Why
would you do that?
And it's like, because I want it. And to me, this is literally a testament to the fact of go after what you want.
Yeah.
Because what was she going to do? Say no?
No, and that's it.
And that would have been that.
And that's it.
And you would have still had a job, still been good, and not have to worry about this again.
Exactly. Because what I didn't want, as I was talking, I was like, you know what? I don't want a situation where I'm already in a role where I'm excited for, I'm good with, but I know this is something else that I want. I didn't want to jump into another situation and really like put my time and effort, because you don't want to do a bad job, but also do a good job in something that you didn't necessarily want to do, where you're pining and waiting and saying, oh, this is really what I want. I'm like, you know what? I can't do that 2-3 times over. Like, you know, it just doesn't make sense to stretch yourself. If you're going to stretch yourself thin, stretch it on the things that you really want to do. And so that's what sparked it. And it's not to say if I did that or you do that, it's all going to work out. It was really timing too, and just opportunity. And I think also just knowing that I at least had other things to back it up. So
and positioning.
Because
it's not, here's my thing. People shoot their shot with me all the time.
Okay.
I will come and edit your videos. Okay, let me see some of your work. You've never done this before.
Right.
Okay. So what about our videos that you see makes you think that you with no experience should come do
editing.
this? But yet you had the experience to back it up.
Yeah.
Like you've been doing this on your own consistently. And that's the piece that I want to make sure that the audience walks away with.
True.
Is the fact that don't just be shooting shots without any experience. Because like if she's talking to this person about social media and has no media background, she's never done any of these things, nothing she can send this woman or talk to her. This woman would probably been like, so you playing with my time.
That's it.
You know?
That's it.
And so I love the fact that you've taken the time to really build on your own.
Yes.
Like you didn't wait till Revolt showed up to then say, okay, let me start doing things. You were doing things on your own. You've had platforms. You've done interviews. You have a reel. Like y'all should see her reel. Like for real.
See my reel. Okay.
We might have to, we're gonna put your reel in the show notes.
We're
gonna have to link to your reel because she literally like the reel was so nice. I was like, oh, this is a media gift for real. I need to create one of these tonight. And so I want you to kind of like close out and tell the audience like, what's next? Like what does next look like for you? You're on Monuments to Me, which is an amazing podcast, you know, here to amplify women. And the conversations that are being had are amazing. Yeah. But what's next after that for you? Like, with what you're envisioning? Because, look, baby, let's be real. I want to be the one to be like, I had her first on my show.
Yes, I love that.
Don't forget the little people as you blow up.
Partners in crime.
But tell the audience, like, what is it that's next in this media mogul journey for you?
You know what? It's something that I've been thinking about, especially these last couple of weeks, because I love what you said in terms of building, because there was a time while I was working every week, every weekend, every Sunday, I'd be doing my podcast, like interviewing guests, editing, all the stuff. And now that I'm transitioning to doing what we're doing on Monuments to Me, I'm realizing, in a sense, I'm still dedicating the same amount of time as though I have this crazy time-intensive full-time job and this. And so what's next for me immediately is to really just transition, like, how I allocate my time towards the on-air goals, like making sure that, listen, treat it like you would treat that 9 to 5, like in terms of a 9 to 5 becomes that 8 to 7, you know? So really putting the time in when it comes to that. I think what's next really is just putting myself out there more. And so, like, really sharing my story more. So I love, again, like having this platform and, like, you know, wanting to do that with more people and more opportunities. And honestly, just more. Like, I want to be able to, again, like, if talk show host is something that I really want to do, do it on a bigger, better, more, like, you know, larger scale. And so that's the goal. And while I'm doing that, just, again, think through how I can create a community around it, because that's another big piece for me. So whether that be products, whether that be like, you know, doing the social media thing and really building that, whatever that is, like just creating an opportunity to not only be the space, but to, like, create some sort of space so that we are lifting together, because it's important, you know.
It is. I love that. And I love the fact that you just go after what you want.
Thank you.
Because so many people don't do that. Like, they're just afraid. And guess what? It's okay to be afraid.
Yeah.
But it's also best that you recognize that you are afraid, so that this way you can work through those barriers.
Yes.
Akilah has really done an amazing job of positioning herself, utilizing podcasts to position herself. Because if you think about it, she used her reel from podcasting and what she was able to do on her own to position herself to working with Revolt, being an on-air host. And I tell people all the time, you don't have to be independent if you don't want to be.
Right.
You just have to utilize your content and position yourself in a way so that way people can find you. And so, last closeout. I know I said that a second ago.
No, we good. We here.
What bit of advice, like, if you had 3 things you had to tell people, what bit of advice would you have for them if they're trying to utilize, like, as independent podcasters, use their own podcast as a source to get eyes and that visibility on them?
True. I think the first thing is be okay and be comfortable with not having the views and just pretty much failing in that sense. Because that, you know, it was at first tough for me to think through, like, man, I'm spending all this time and we got 10 people and 7 of which are my friends that I sent the link to.
That's my mama. That's my cousin.
Checking it out.
Okay.
And so that felt like consistent failure for me, because it was just week after week sometimes, you know, trying to really just grow that platform, grow that audience in a sense. And so until I finally became comfortable with that, because at least, yes, I was putting it out there, but at least I was getting used to doing it, getting used to the routine and getting comfortable with it, and getting comfortable with other people recognizing me in that space, because you don't even know till later on. It's like, oh yeah, people are now thinking of you as a podcast host, as a this host, because at least you're still putting yourself out there. So that would be one thing. Just be comfortable with that failure and still keep going. I think another thing too is what we talked about, just like put yourself out there, like utilize LinkedIn. I know some people like to just keep to Instagram and TikTok, and it's amazing, but, like, recognize that you are joining a business. You are not joining, like, you know, and where do business people sit? They are on LinkedIn. They're on Twitter for media too, like things of that nature. That's tips for me, because my Twitter is dormant. But right? But I think just really utilize those spaces where you can at least make connections and just at least start conversations. And it may not be something, and it shouldn't be something immediately where it's an ask, but at least to just to know what's happening and know how you can get involved. And I think the last thing is really just to own your brand in a sense, even though and even if that brand can and will evolve. There are things that I said probably that I was like, you know, oh, I am an entertainment expert, a fashion expert, a lifestyle expert. And yes, I love all those things, but that's not like the core of my brand now. And it's okay to just like evolve, but at least stick to something. Start with something to come out with. And so really like knowing your brand, knowing failure, and knowing the power of networking be the 3 things.
Come on, know your brand. Don't just be all over the place,
Yes.
you know. But no, thank you so much, Akilah, for joining me today and for really sharing your journey with us. You guys, look, you have to tap into this, and you definitely should be listening to Monuments to Me, a Revolt original podcast where Akilah is a host, where she shares amazing content because she's really focused in on how to like amplify Black women. And so tell everybody where they can find you and how they can kind of stay connected and reach out to you, because girl, folks finna be in your DM.
Okay, come on in. Occasionally.
She said, let me be clear.
So everything is at Akilah Ffriend. That's AKILAH FFRIEND.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you guys again for tuning into the Podcast Trapper. And I'm always excited to bring you new people who can really kind of share their journey and their insights to help you along your podcasting journey. If there's anybody that you can think of that you're like, you know what, I want to hear from this person, let me know. Drop a comment so that this way we can, you know, invite them into the trap. Until next time, you guys, have a good one.